Hey everybody, Ryan here from RD Ceramics. Today I'm going to do a little demo here on the wheel, show you how I throw my oil bottles. So this is one of them. It's a pretty simple one. It's got some subtle texture, got a solid glaze on it. Nothing too fancy, but we're going to go ahead and demo that for you and show you what I do. Let me grab one more thing too. So we're going to start with 1.5 pounds of clay. Sometimes get questions about my clay. It is Kentucky Mudworks Iceman, which is a white stoneware. But 1.5 pounds is what I like to use. Go ahead and do cone up, cone down. Get this thing centered into, I like to start these in kind of a tuna can shape. Okay. And then we're going to open it up, set the bottom. My floor is probably about 3 inches wide maybe. And then we're going to go in hard with the sponge for my first pull. Go for that volcano shape. Make sure you keep this lip nice and level as you go. I like to compress it after every pull because as you get to the stage where you need to start collaring it in, it's going to be important to make sure that it's level. Okay, so you can see I got the volcano shape. Then we're going to go in for the second one. This is going to be another pretty good height pull. So right now it kind of resembles a mug a little bit at this stage. The next stage is going to be to get the last little bit from the bottom there. You can see it's got that kind of wide skirt there. Make sure to compress that lip. And I would say, just to be safe as you're getting used to this, I would encourage you to leave the last maybe 1/2 inch or inch of the top a little bit thicker, just because you will be collaring it in, and if it's too thin and you start collaring it in, it could potentially start folding in on itself. So I would definitely encourage that. I'm just gonna add a little more water. We're gonna slow this down a little bit more. And this is gonna be another hard pull. We're gonna push really hard, work our way up. I'm starting to let off here. Okay. You see I kind of slowed down when I got to this last section here. Okay, the next portion is going to be the collaring portion. So we're going to actually bring that neck in to a bottle form. Before I do that, I need to take the water out because otherwise I won't be able to get any excess water out of the bottom. There's not a lot in there, but make sure you get it out so you don't run the risk of having issues while it's drying. Okay, so this is the step. I'm going to wet both of my hands. I'm going to try to get this as vertical as possible. And then we're going to start to collar it in. I can feel that this is a little bit thinner than I would like, but I'm going to go for it. Make sure your hands are nice and wet. Make sure the clay's got a little bit of moisture on it too. Okay, and I'm going to work on this top like 2 to 3 inches of it. And I like to kind of angle it where my top hand is the most inward. My top fingers up here. And then my bottom fingers and my thumbs are pushing into. And you see it folded in on itself. If you do get a mess up like this, try to collar it a little bit more. And then I'm going to end up cutting this top portion off. So I would say that issue was with my pulls. I pulled a little bit too thin on the top. That's all right though. Just going to be a little bit shorter of a bottle. Make sure that's thick enough. Okay. Then I'm going to go back in, start a little bit lower. Collar it in. Make sure you go all the way to the top. You can even see it's starting to get a little wavy. That just means it's a little bit thin. So you can kind of compress that to thicken it up. All right, then I'm gonna go in one more time. Collar, collar, collar. Work my way all the way to the top. Okay. And if you want, because you did move the clay in, it could withstand a little bit more of a pull. So I like to pull from the shoulder all the way up the neck. Get a little bit more height there. And I'm just refining it a little bit more. Okay, so the thing you should be aware of when you're making these that's really important, if you care about making sure you use the little rubber stoppers for it, like this one. You see it's got the rubber stopper in here. If you're using these standard stoppers, I get mine on dhgate.com. You can just look up liquor pourer and get them, or you can get them off Amazon or whatever. So depending on your clay shrinkage, my clay shrinks about 11%, 11 to 12%. If you do the math to figure that out, you need the opening to be about 3/4 of an inch or a little bit wider. And what I do typically is when the clay's wet, I like to have that opening about 1 inch. And you say, how do you measure that to make sure it fits every time? I don't have to do this anymore, but what I've found is using something standard instead of a tape measure where there could be some room for error. Use something like a 1 inch brush. This is always 1 inch. It's always gonna be 1 inch. And then you can use that as your guide. So what I would do if I were throwing these and I need to make sure, you would hold this up, hold it over top of the opening, and the opening should be about 1 inch on the interior diameter. If it's too big, the stopper's not gonna fit and it's gonna pop out when you're trying to pour it. If it's too small, the stopper may not fit or it may creep out. So you wanna kind of make sure you have the right fit. And I found that going a little bit smaller than 1 inch is better than going a little bit wider than 1 inch. So, and the next thing is you can see that's not really level up here. And what I'll do, I'll just go in here with the needle tool, just level that off. Okay. And another thing to be aware of when you're making these is the contact point. So you want to have as much of a contact point as you can for that stopper. If you have too little of a contact point, let's say your top is like this and it comes to almost like a point, you only have these little portions right here at the very tip top to make contact. If that doesn't fit perfectly, then that thing's not going to stay in there. If you have a longer neck like this and it's straight up and down, you can imagine you have a much better area to work with that can make contact with that rubber stopper so that it will stay in place. And I've also found that if you angle it outward like a V, the stopper is actually already in kind of a V shape. You can see that it's wider at the top than it is at the bottom. So if you have that shape on your putt, it's likely that there's not going to be enough contact with that stopper and it will go in and then it'll pop itself out. It'll creep out. So what I found is keeping it as much straight up and down as you possibly can where that rubber piece is going to be in contact with the wall in the neck is the best option to make sure that it fits right and it will function as best as possible. So that's what I would recommend. And I'm going to just collar this in one more time, clean up that lip. You can use a chamois if you want. And I also get questions about glazing them. Do I leave the top inside edge unglazed? Do I glaze it? whatnot. I do glaze it. I glaze the whole thing. Ideally, you want the thing to fit the right width. The thing I don't like is if you unglaze it, you could potentially encourage whatever liquid to be inside to absorb into the clay if it's unglazed. I'd rather just glaze it all, inside, outside. Nothing's, there's no risk of like moisture soaking into the clay, because your clay is not usually so vitrified that there's no absorption at all. So something will absorb into the clay if you have raw clay there. All right, just do the undercut, and then this is the chance if you want to put any kind of design or anything on it. I like to use this metal rib. Add a little bit of design to it. A little character for the glaze to work off of. And then we're done. So I'm going to cut it off. You can throw these on bats if you want. I tend to go with throwing them and taking them off as I go because I like to make a whole bunch at once. I don't like to take up the shelf space and board space with a whole bunch of bats everywhere. All right, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Bye.